Hi, everybody, and welcome to Where's God podcast. In this podcast, we try to find God in movies, shows, books, and places where He's not obviously found. And I have my mom back with me as the guest for this episode. How are you doing, Mom?
I'm doing good. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for coming back. This episode, we're talking about Where's God in Happiness for Beginners. This is a Netflix movie, and it was also a book that I read a few years ago, and then I was happy to find out that it became a movie, and I really love the book, and I really like the movie. Did you like the movie, Mom?
Yeah, it was fun. It was kind of a comedy too, so that was fun.
Yeah, I think it's like fun, cute, lighthearted, rom-com, just all the good things. So this movie is about this woman who's recently divorced. She's probably in her 30s and she's just trying to, I would say, find purpose in life and challenge herself and just get some life back in her life, I would say. And so she decides to sign up for this backpacking trip across the Appalachians in Connecticut. And it's a beginner one, but she's hiking like 6 to 10 miles a day. And she just really wants to.
I would say she wants to find out who she really is, and maybe she's had a lot of trauma in her life, and I think she needs some healing.
Very good. So when everybody's introducing themselves, who's going on the camping trip, they just say a little bit about themselves and why they're there. And Helen, the main character, the woman we've been describing, she talks about how she's recently divorced and how her husband didn't treat her well and there was infidelity and she couldn't have a baby. I think she even said she had a miscarriage. So life really hadn't gone as planned for her. So my first question, Mom, is how can God help us when things don't go as planned in life? What can we do?
I think the biggest thing we can do is to trust God. He knows what's best for us. He knows the beginning from the end. And when things go haywire, the opposite of what we thought was going to happen, which happens for a lot of us, it can be very painful. But if you know that God knows the end from the beginning, that can help put peace in your trust. And also, there's that parable or story about the bush. I don't think it's a blackberry bush, but I'll call it a blackberry bush. And the gardener is taking care of it, and he starts cutting away a lot of the bush. And he said, "You're supposed to be a bush, not a tree. So that's why I'm pruning you." And God does that to us. He can do a lot more with us than what we can. And so when he prunes us back and we get humbled and need him more in our life, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But we can also just trust him that he knows what he's doing. I think that's what's going to save us from, saying, why me, if we can trust him. I believe that no matter what we do, if we make mistakes, doing something really wrong, and say it breaks up our family, or we think that we've totally ruined the plan. The plan is over. Now we're so off track we can't get back into whatever God has in store for us, but that isn't true. No matter which way we turn, God always has a plan for us. I guess because he's known the beginning from the end. So I guess he knew we were going to make those mistakes, or that car accident was going to happen, or we lost our ability, we got paralyzed or something, and we were like dancers or football players or something. But no matter what happens, there's still the plan that he has for us, and it's still worth traveling, especially if it's with him.
I love that. Yeah, I think I can definitely relate to that in life. I think we all can when things don't go the way we thought they would, but there's still there's always another plan, another path, maybe a better one, and whatever we went through can help us grow and be better as we take the next steps and not hold back, like you were saying why me and things like that. All right, so on this backpacking trip, there were a lot of rules, and I don't know if the dude in charge, if his name was Mason. It could have been Mason. I'm not sure. But the one who was leading the backpacking trip, he was always very diligent in telling them exactly what they needed to do, giving them all the rules. If anyone took a misstep, he would address it right away. So there were a lot of rules. Even like before they had to prepare, they had to, break in their hiking boots. And then on the trip, they had to make sure they didn't get trench foot by hanging up and drying their socks. If they felt a hot spot on their foot for a blister, they had to take care of it right away. At night, they had to hang up their food so that bears wouldn't get it. And they really had to work as a team. And trying to relate that to our lives, why do you think God gives us a lot of rules or, commandments?
I think they're there to keep us safe. I have a little example of this. I was kayaking down the Provo River with Jim. We had our red little kayaks. And we had done this before on rafts with the rafting company. And they had told us, the different things to look out for. And the number one rule was to portage your tube or kayak or whatever it was around this one spot, because there was a train trestle going across the river, and there were all these trestles holding it up, and you could hit one, and then anyways, so it wouldn't be good. So Jim and I decided to ignore that rule when we were going down on the kayaks, and Jim was ahead of me, and he made it through just fine, but I kind of panicked when I got up close, and whammo, right into the trestle and down into the water I went. The canoe or the kayak kept going, the paddle kept going, my shoe kept going, and I hit the rocks on the bottom of the river. And it was not a catastrophe because I didn't get really hurt, just bruised up, but it sure bruised my ego. And it made me think that, yes, rules are important to follow, and they do keep us safe. And I've always thought of that as an example of why I should keep the commandments, actually.
Yeah, I remember that story about you. You got pretty banged up. It wasn't as like, I don't know, you described it as you didn't get too roughed up, but you did. Yeah, I think these commandments are to keep us happy, honestly, and like you said, healthy, and they might seem harder at the time, but it makes our lives easier in the end and happier and a more full life. And just like it might take time to hang up the food so bears don't get it, or it might take extra time to dry out your socks, but in the end, it saves them from a lot of like heartache and trouble and injuries.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's choices out there. You've got the commandments, and then you've got, doing what you want to do. And it seems easier at the time, like you said, Chrissy, to do what you want to do, but in the end it's really the harder way.
Yeah, and I think you just need to keep that in mind and try to be disciplined, and pray a lot so that you're given the like motivation and strength to keep following his word, because sometimes you're really tired and you don't want to set up the next day for camp or whatever. Okay, so Helen, the main character, she is a very strong personality. I would probably describe her as like type A personality. She's always very organized. Seems like she always like knows what she wants in life, even though this struggle has kind of made that murky for her. But she is the type of person that has all her ducks in a row. And she says to Jake, who is the love interest in the movie, who's her brother's best friend. He ends up coming on the backpacking trip with her. He tries to help her because he used to be a doctor, helps her with her blisters when she fell onto a rock and beat up her knee. He helps tend to that wound, but she's still kind of like, well, thanks for your help, but I don't really need it, and I don't need any saving whatsoever. I can save myself. She outright says this. So what does this movie teach us about thinking we can do things on our own?
Well, it mentions, I could save myself many times in the movie. And of course, it brings to mind, our Savior and how deeply we need him. And it's a journey to come to know how deeply we need him. But as far as the movie goes, you come to find out that they all need each other. Hugh gets hurt, he breaks his leg, and they need everyone to help him out of the forest to get to the ambulance and to stay with them during the night and to find the other people. I don't know, it's just everyone had a role to play and everyone was needed. And that's the way it is in life. We all need each other. And it's good to keep that in mind because sometimes you look at people and you think they don't need anyone, but really we do need other people. We're here for each other. We're sitting in the pews together at church and we're sitting shoulder to shoulder, and it is could be described as a hospital ward, not just a church ward, because everyone is sick in some way and we can all help each other. And she was very judgmental of Jake, and she just thought of him as, her little brother's friend and what, dumb kid he was or whatever. So if she had looked at him with new eyes and seen the person he really was, she would have been more kind to him and she would have been building him up. And that's what we need to do. We need to build each other up and give each other the benefit of the doubt, because we can save each other by lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down like she was always tearing Jake down. And so that is a way to save each other in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it made, after Hugh's accident, when he stepped on a rotten log and broke his leg, everybody had to help and contribute, like you were saying, Mom. And after Helen had found her way in the woods to the other campers, they had broken off at one point, and brought them back to Hugh. And after they carried Hugh on a homemade stretcher out of jackets and sticks for probably miles, she seemed a lot happier. She seemed mellowed out, and I think that had to do with her putting others in front of how she felt about herself. And she was looking outside of herself and only focusing on how to help Hugh. And I think it made her feel a lot better. So I think if we focus on saving others and helping each other out, it can make us feel better.
Brings out the best in us.
Yeah, it really did bring out. And the leader says something interesting. He said, it feels good, doesn't it, when they put Hugh in the ambulance? And she was like, what? And he said, it feels good to feel so exhausted. And she said, yes. But really, I think he should have asked her, it feels good to help someone, it feels good to work as a team. I think that should have been the question. All right. So there's a lot of different personalities on this backpacking trip. And one of the other guys, I don't remember his name, but he is like, I'm the fastest, I'm the best. He's always going ahead of everybody. And the leader is always trying to tell him, you need to work as a team. You need to stay together. This is what will make you a good backpacker. Teamwork is an essential skill of being a backpacker or a hiker. And he just really, this backpacker thinks he's really good, unstoppable. And as soon as Hugh gets hurt, he freezes. He doesn't know what to do. He literally just sits down and puts his head in his hands because he doesn't know how to help, and Helen has to take over. And you kind of start thinking, well, yeah, look at you. You weren't as good as you thought, right? So this is a big turning point for that character because he realized he wasn't as good as he thought he was. And maybe he realized that the things he thought were important in life, that he was so good at, weren't so important in life. And it was actually like being a teammate, helping others. That's what was really important. And you think like, you start thinking poorly of him, but then you realize that actually this mistake was probably essential for him. Him being in this situation and not helping Hugh when he needed it ended up really changing the trajectory of where he was going in life and helping him realize what was most important. And so I think that this mistake actually helped him, and every backpacker got a trail name, and at the beginning his trail name was Wall Street, but then it is changed at the end, I think, to something like Big Deer, and deer represents change. So he was the one who changed the most, I would say. Well, Helen did as well, but and I think it was because of that moment of him not being there for his other campers, of him feeling really low about himself, that made the change. So, Mom, how can mistakes we make in life help us?
He was humble. He was humbled by it. I mean, he could have like been defensive or something, but he let it humble himself, and so that was the ignition, or the thing that got him going in the direction of growth. Instead of just thinking he was all that, he was able to see that mistakes are part of life. If we think of it in a spiritual way, it is part of the plan that we make mistakes and we learn by them. And we know that we experience opposition in all things. And so Adam and Eve, they had two choices. They couldn't keep one commandment without breaking the other. And so it's been the plan from the beginning that we make mistakes and learn from them, just like they did.
Yeah, and I think, he had a choice there. He could have kept feeling down about himself and kept beating himself up like, I can't believe I didn't help you. I wasn't there for my fellow backpackers. Or he had the choice to say, no, I'm not going to be like that. This is the man I'm choosing to be. So mistakes, failures in life, they're really important, and they're only important if we choose to better ourselves and see how that experience happened for us and not to us. That's from a book me and my mom are reading called The Gap and the Gains, if you want to check it out. But it's about how every experience can be something that is for us and not to us. And I think in this case, this man really helped make that experience be for him and help him learn how to work with others and see that everybody has some value and not just himself. So the love interest that we were talking about before, Jake, he has always been in love with Helen and you can see it, and she's, like my mom said, she's always viewed him as just this like annoying brother's friend, but he has always seen the good in her. He says throughout the movie, like, why did you marry that dummy guy? Like, what were you thinking? And you can tell like he's really saying, you should be with me. You should be with someone who deserves you. She judges him quite a bit because he ended up quitting being a doctor, and now he's going on this backpacking trip, and then he plans to go and study whales and marine life. And she just thinks that's so weird. Why would you do that? And we find out in a scene towards the end of the movie that he is going blind and he really can't see at night anymore, and so he gets lost, and she goes out to find him, and he's so grateful when she finds him. This is the point where she is saving him instead of the other way around, and he ends up telling her, I'm going blind, and then she realizes, oh, that's why he quit being a doctor. All the times that she was being judgmental of him, now she's realizing the reasoning behind it. So I think that can relate to sometimes people who appear strong. They still have things going on within themselves, even though on the outward they look like they have it all together. What are your thoughts about that, Mom?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about that before, yeah. That some people don't look like they need help or anything. And it made me, when I saw him huddled there in the dark, afraid, because he couldn't see at night. So that was part of his going blindness. He can't see at night. And he must have gone away from camp, on his own, and misjudged what time it was or something. And so he's huddling there, and Helen found him. And, he confessed to her that he was going blind. And then it's just made me think of that hymn, Lord, I would follow thee. One of the lines is, in the quiet heart is hidden sorrow that the eye can't see. Who am I to judge another, Lord? I would follow thee. And I think that is a really good thing for us to think of as we see other people and we think they're doing something weird or something different than we would do, or even, people that are dressed in fancy clothes and fancy cars or something like that. There are sorrows that our eyes can't see, and that we should all treat people the same with love and respect and not judgment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good lesson, and I'm glad you brought up that hymn. That's like a really beautiful couple lines that you shared from it. Yeah, and I have heard the phrase before that we can be curious instead of judgmental, like you were saying, when we see somebody doing something that isn't something we would do or feel like they're making a weird life decision. Or if they're wearing clothes we don't like or have a different hairstyle, we can be curious about that and just kind of wonder, I wonder what brought that on, instead of like, why do they look like that? Why are they thinking that way? Why would they do that? And I think that's a thought that can help us start to not be judgmental and to try to see people's hearts and get to know them better.
And I think it helps people not feel judged when we're curious. When we're curious, we're asking questions in a way that will make people not feel judged.
Yeah, I agree. So when he's in the woods and he's telling her about his blindness, he tells her that he feels very lost. And of course, he was literally lost in the woods. But he's also saying he feels lost because his life is completely changing. His life as he knows it is going to be completely different in a year or two or more, I'm not sure. And he was fully able to do everything. He was a doctor, and soon he won't even be able to see. And my question is, how can God help us when we feel lost?
God has given us everything that we need to get through this life. And he's given us prayer. He's given us our memories of all the things that we've done in our lives up to that point. I think that we can use all of these things to find our way again. It goes back to that trusting thing too, that if we trust God,
we can remember what God has done for us and how he's helped us out of struggles in the past. I think that is a big help. And I also think that knowing that we're God's children and what our true purpose is here on earth can help us not feel lost. Like, I'm going to go back to the book that we're reading, The Gap and the Gain. The author just talks about this really famous football player and how he says, I would still be happy even if I didn't have football. And that was a huge uproar for the media and fans of sports. But he was saying, it was Trevor Lawrence. He was saying, I don't need football to be happy, and I'm still whole without it. And I mean, man, eyesight is a lot different than just playing football. But if you just come down to like the very essence, the very core of why we're here, it's to learn and grow and to become closer to God and to help others, and he'll still be able to do that. Even if he can't see, he can still feel whole even without his eyesight. And yes, we are lost, but I think that's so that God can help us find our way sometimes. That's why we feel lost, or we're supposed to find our way to God when we feel lost.
It makes it so we have to depend on him, and that's a good thing because it draws us closer to him.
Well, this has been great. I always get like a little like, I don't know what to say for these podcasts, or this isn't going to be any good. But then once we write down our thoughts and end up sharing and talking about them, I feel like, wow, we found a lot of great things here. And I definitely felt impacted as we were talking about the messages from this movie. So I hope that you can find God in these lessons, and that it can help you through feeling lost or feeling down about making mistakes. And we'll see you next episode.